Hi everyone, Annie Burridge here from Austin Opera. Welcome to episode 5 of Live from Indy Terrace and the second of our Artists in Residences editions. We are now on day 30 of shelter in place here in Austin, Texas, and I hope you are all hanging in there. This week we are so excited to provide an exclusive insider's look into the compositional process of Austin's famed composer, Graham Reynolds. Called the quintessential modern composer by the London Independent, Graham Reynolds creates, performs, and records music for film, theater, dance, rock clubs, and concert halls, just to name a few. Here in Austin, Graham has composed several ballets for Ballet Austin, and today he will share excerpts from his acclaimed chamber opera, Pancho Villa From a Safe Distance. As you know, Live from Indy Terrace was created to keep employing and promoting Austin opera artists. Graham recently signed with the London-based label Fire Records and is set to release his original score for Alfred Hitchcock's silent classic, The Lodger, later this fall. So we encourage you to show your support by purchasing that album or another one of Graham Reynolds' albums available online. Thanks again for tuning in. Stay safe.
Hey all, it's Graham Reynolds. Welcome to Live from Indy Terrace. This is the road version at my East Austin studio. I'm going to give you a sort of three-part tour, I guess. First, I'm going to show you around the physical space of my studio and the place where I work. I've totally redone it to work solo. Usually we have a whole bunch of people helping me out working here. And then I'm going to give you a tour of my virtual studio, the computer and the space where most contemporary composers are doing the vast majority of their work. And then I'm going to show you a little bit of an opera of mine called Pancho Villa From a Safe Distance, and talk a little bit about the composing process for that and the performance process as well. So I hope you are all staying safe and well, and I hope you enjoy this little tour. Okay, let's switch over to my phone, and I'll walk around the studio with you. All right, here we go. This is Red House Studio, we call it. Got a whole bunch of guitars and drums and a nightmare of cables. I'm not very good friends with cables. You got a vibraphone, they call them quads, even when they have 6 drums apparently. So some marching quads, some Chinese cymbals I got in Beijing, glockenspiel, big gong I also got in Beijing, some Italian giant tambourines from Puglia, bunch of guitars and whatnot. Mexican guitarron, big marching bass drums. A piano, of course, timbales, congas, bongos, and my drum set. I wanted my studio to look like a library as well as a studio, and so all the bookshelves. Let's walk around a little bit. We have microphones everywhere. Now, the ideal is that everything is wired up, ready to go all the time. Since I did all this rearranging here, it's not quite like that right now, but okay. Got the amplifier and pedal set up for guitars and basses over here, the baby little piano. The desks of people who are not working here during this current situation. Music stands and all the audio monitors. Some critical gear here, preamps and interface and things like that. A lot of the gear has been stripped out because everybody's working from home during all of this. Okay, we got some of my keyboards that I use live, and then the real hub of the whole thing is my setup. Although our big computer is actually home with Buzz Moran, who's working on a bunch of our projects while we're in this situation. So this is my computer for traveling and for playing live, and that's what I'm using during this. So next, since actually, as much as I love playing the piano, and I've been doing a lot of piano during all this, I do spend a huge amount of my time on the computer. And so we're going to go inside the computer and talk about the tools that we use as contemporary composers in there. Okay. I love having control over the whole process from the beginning to end. We can spend as long as we want recording an idea, mixing an idea, editing things, adding layers, and there's no stress put on that because the studio is mine and we can spend infinite amount of time just based on deadlines, and that's about it. That's the parameter. I have plenty of microphones. I have a lot of gear, but I do things set up a little bit differently from a normal studio. Typically, there would be a control room, a silent room where you would be barricaded off from the tracking room, where you would track the vocalist or the drums or the band or whatever you want to do. Sometimes multiple rooms of these rooms. I like everything in this one room, and so here we are in the one room, and that way I can know everything that's going on on the different projects we're working on, different people that are working on them, and also since so much of the time I'm also recording myself, just being close to everything is best for me. And now the primary method now, although people still do record on tape, is to record digitally. So you turn that audio into ones and zeros. And so this critical piece of gear is called an audio interface, and it takes those audio waves that have become electronic signals that become then digital signals, feeds them to the computer, and then feeds them back out to your speakers or headphones or your whatever it is. So that's the first piece of gear. That comes in to what they call a DAW, D-A-W, Digital Audio Workstation. This is called Reaper, and you may have heard of Pro Tools, or if you have Apple, you've heard of GarageBand, or Logic is the professional version that Mac has. This is the recording studio in a box. Now, I double click there, I get a track. So this window here, the big space, that's the sequencer. That's where you put things in the order that you want them. Down below here is the mixer. That's where you choose how much of you want of any one thing. So let's do a little recording. Let's say that this is going to be my voice, and we'll arm it to record. And here we go. I'm going to turn that click off because we don't need it. But 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see that waveform happening. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, there we go. We've captured that. Now, this is one of the two main kinds of tracks that you'll have. And let's make this a little bit bigger. Now, I can duplicate that and duplicate it again. And so you get how this works in a time-based way. It's pretty simple. I'm going to show you. We can put them out of sequence or put them in a sequence. We don't need it. 1, 2, 3, 4. You can see that wave. There we go. Now that I've captured it, I can put it into a different room in a virtual way. So let's see. Let's put it in a big cathedral. Here we go. So all of a sudden, I sound like I'm in the cathedral. Reverb is one of the very basic kinds of effects that you use all the time in recording. Because we don't need it, but there's a much smaller room. 2, 3, 4. You can see that waveform happening. 1, 2. Click off because we don't need it, but smaller room. All right. So now That's how you'd capture anything from voice to cello to piano. It gets a little, fancier, but you get the basic idea. This is a MIDI track and not an audio track. So. So that is an algorithmic simulation of a piano that I'm able to trigger. And let's record that for a second. Okay, I'll hit record. Okay, now you can see how these two different tracks look very different from each other. This is an audio track. This is a MIDI track. Instead of what kind of instrument, it tells you what notes, how loud, that's this stuff down here, and on and on and on, every kind of parameter you can think of. So this same information, let's turn off that piano, and let's add a synthesizer instead. This is called Omnisphere, and it's in half the movies and television shows you see, if not more than half actually. Let's see, how about bowed things? Bowed kalimba drum. I don't actually know what that. Oh, sounds pretty cool. I'm going to tell you a bit more about Omnisphere just because it's a good illustration of the current state of orchestral color or instrumental color. As you can see, I can take that same information, that same waveform, and send it to another instrument. So it's the same notes, same velocity, how hard I'm playing it. Everything else is the same, but the instrument itself is different. I can't do that with this recording of my voice. So MIDI has some huge advantages. The obvious big disadvantage is that a real cello sounds amazing in a way that is very difficult for a computer or a MIDI instrument to capture, although the technology gets better all the time. Also, if I recorded piano and I say I didn't like, say I didn't like these middle notes. If I recorded it with audio, extracting those notes, extremely difficult. But here, I can just delete them off because we don't need it, but 1, 2, and they're gone. I can also do really, say I played a wrong note. Say this was meant to be, what is it now? Maybe it was meant to be an E flat instead of an E. Change it. I can perfect my performance to whatever degree I want. Working with an orchestra, one of the largest array of instrumental color you can get in the Western canon pre-20th century. You've got strings, you've got brass, you've got winds, you've got percussion. Percussion has a million different potential colors in there. If I open this up, here are what they call patches down on here on the right. And these patches are each individual sounds like the bowed kalimba drum that we just played. Now if I show them all, and then I've added a few in the meantime, there are, in this one instance of Omnisphere, more than 14,000 color choices. So you could spend weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks listening to just the color options. So those are the two basic tracks. You record as many as you want, you mix them how you want, you output it, and that's how, this is the very beginning of how a composer works to record their music in today's world. a bit like a song cycle, and it's a collage way of telling a story. It's not linear. There's not a single plot. It's about Pancho Villa the revolutionary and all sorts of things from put together from different times of his life. So we're working on an album of this now. We've been touring around all over the country and out of the country, and we've recorded all the tracks, and we're using this time of we're stuck in the studio and stuck at home to finally put together these mixes. And okay, so I think we'll just start by listening to a little bit. This is a live performance, and we'll hit play and we'll listen to the first, minute or two together.
Junio 5, 77, 1800, familia pobre.
There's Paul.
Quedan solos madre y sus hermanos. Doro,
So, in classical tradition, especially pre-computers, you get out your paper, you write down all the notes, you hand it over, and the other folks play it. Most of the composers, from Bach to Beethoven to Prokofiev, were all performers in a very serious way as well. But it's very hierarchical tradition, and which works really well in quite a few different ways. But then I also grew up in playing in bands and in a band tradition, which, while there may be a leader, there's a lot more independence, and there's some huge advantages to that, because one huge disadvantage that a composer has is that, if I'm writing for, say, bassoon, unless that's a specialty of mine, almost certainly the bassoonist will know more about the bassoon than I do. And of course I can, ask questions of the bassoonist and work back and forth. But ultimately I'm choosing what the bassoonist plays. And, let's start pointing out some of the folks in the band. So we got Liz Cass here. We got Paul Sanchez here, our two singers. And then, Adrian Casada here, Alexis Buffum here, Jeremy Bruck here, Utah Hamrick. There I am. So Adrian, the guitar is such a specific thing that it goes through a chain of effects. You don't actually know what's going to come out the other end. You know what note it is, but you don't know what sound is going to come out unless you somehow tell them every single piece of gear that they're going to have. But as every guitarist has a different set of personalized gear, it's almost impossible to do that. So there's a great deal of freedom that I wanted to give to Adrian, because he knows his gear better than anyone else. So some of his notes are written down, some of his notes are not written down, and he develops his own sound that adds to my my overall composition of the piece. Now, I know Adrian pretty well, and I know his not every sound he can create, but his basic palette, and so that helps going in, and the conversation it goes more easily when you know the guitarist or the instrumentalist you're working with. Alexis and I work together all the time, and she's an improviser as well as a reader, so she has a greater degree of freedom than the typical violinist. She's also sending her violin through a bunch of effects through her laptop, similar to what I'm doing here. Jeremy, like if you get a jazz chart, it doesn't have a drum part. It rarely even has a bass part. And we both were trained in jazz tradition, so very little of the drum parts are written out, certainly not note for note. There's a general feel, there's entrance points and exit points, there's breaks, things like that, and we work on it together, but he has a great deal of independence there. Okay, let's go a little further in the opera and see. So this is the one time in the opera where they're not on microphone. Liz comes to the front of the stage and sings this piece. Actually, let me just turn it up a little bit. She's a little louder. Apologize for those pops. Okay, so after, this is how far in? 42 minutes into the opera, and you've heard these voices, amazing voices, but through microphones the whole time, and all of a sudden you hear her just for this one song, a cappella, and Liz has an amazing voice, so it makes for a time to show off her voice and to what it means to be in the room with a voice. So I've got, in my setup here, I've got a digital piano, and I just use that for piano. It's sort of reliable. I know it. I've been playing it. Well, not this specific one, but I've been playing piano since I was 5, so it's home base. And above that is a MIDI keyboard, like I was using when we were showing you around the DAW. And that is connected to 8 different Omnispheres, or things like Omnisphere. Omnisphere is not the only synth or sampler that I use, but 8 different patches that I can bring in and out or combine throughout the show. So in this section, when Alexis, that pulsing is from that. Alexis is through a long delay or echo effect. Liz again. Here's a big.
sombras
sin salpicarse en esa extraña revolución
de ese extraño país, México.
Okay, so here we sound a bit more like a rock band with operatic voices, a steady drum beat, big guitar, ostinatos, things like that. So we have those soundscape sections, these sort of rocked out sections, and the more intimate sections. So that's a little tour of my studio where I work, of the computer, and obviously it's just a tiny glimpse into the way composers work, but the vast majority of us are working in software. There's notation software as well, so you can make the old-fashioned kind of scores, and most of us have proficiency in those as well. I didn't show you software notation, but you get the idea. You input the notes, and it looks like an old-fashioned score. But thanks to Austin Opera for having me, and I hope you're all staying safe and well. And if you're in one of those essential jobs, thank you so much for everything you're doing. And for those of you staying home, thank you for staying home, and I hope you are able to enjoy something about the focus time that we've been given here. Okay, thanks, and have a great rest of your day.